Hi, I'm Terry Hartman from Hartman Woodworks. Probably the question I get asked the most is how do I restore my old wooden cutting board back to its original glory? If you stick around, I'll show you how easy it is. The first step in restoring your cutting board is to remove all the knife marks and grooves by sanding. I recommend you start with a 80 grit sandpaper and you move your way up through the grits all the way to 220. Now I've have the aid of some power tools. I have a belt sander, an orbital sander, and some palm sanders. But if you don't have these tools available, you can definitely use just a regular block or a block of wood and some sandpaper and a little bit of elbow grease. When you're using your belt sander, you want to make sure that you continue to move it all over the board evenly so that you're not removing more than one area at a time. If you leave it in one space for a long period of time, it's going to leave dips and valleys, and that's areas water can pull while the cutting board is in use later. Once you've completed the belt sanding with the 80 grit, you want to move on to a 120 grit with a random orbit sander. That will help remove the scratches that were put in by the 80 grit sandpaper and the belt sander. You want to make sure you do the same process you did with the belt sander, moving the sander across the board evenly, and don't stay in one spot for too long. Once you're satisfied that all the deeper grooves have been removed, you want to move on from 120 to 220 grit. And when this is finished, it should leave a nice glass-like finish on top of your board. Wipe off the remaining dust and make sure you inspect your board to see if there's any scratches. If there are deeper scratches, you can always go back through the cycle again with the 80, 120, and the 220. After you have your board smooth and sanded and all those pits and scratches removed, the next option is to finish it and refinish it. You have a couple choices when it comes to finish on your cutting board. The most often used by home users and probably the simplest is a food grade mineral oil. You can find that in any big box store. Application is very easy. You want to apply the food grade mineral oil liberally across the board with a paper towel or a ripped up t-shirt. Works just as well. You want to let that soak in and wipe off the excess and let that dry for about 15 minutes. And then you want to coat it again, completely covering the board again. Let it soak in, let it dry for about 15 minutes, and then wipe off the excess. You want to continue to do that process 3 or 4 times until the entire board is saturated with the mineral oil. The mineral oil soaks into the grain and helps the board keep from cracking and drying out over time. It also provides somewhat of a water resistance to the board, which will help while you're cutting on it as well. If you want a little bit more protection, you can opt for a beeswax mineral oil mix. They sell these at all the box stores as well in different brands. If you're adventurous, you can always make your own for 4 parts mineral oil to 1 part melted beeswax. You want to mix that together and apply it hot. And you want to apply it in the same method that you would the mineral oil. I prefer to use a hard shell professional butcher block oil or a salad bowl finish, which would work as well. It has the availability of the oil, which soaks into the grain of wood and helps for, cracking and drying out. But it also has an added protection layer on top of a hard shell finish that gives the board much more water protection than the other two. The professional butcher block salad bowl finish or butcher block oil tends to last longer as well. So your options are going to depend on how often do you want to be refinishing your board. Alright, I'm going to show you how to apply the professional butcher block oil correctly. I like to start off with some rubber gloves. It's perfectly fine to get this on your hands, but it's a lot easier if you have some gloves, especially for the cleanup. You're going to need obviously something to open the can with and some sort of piece of cloth. I like to use terry cloth or an old ripped up t-shirt to apply the finish. Open the can. We're going to move right from the can, saturate the cloth, and give an even coat on top of the board. Try not to leave any dips or swirl marks for a nice smooth finish. You can see how the oil soaks into the grain, really makes the grain pop. And as the board dries out, you will notice little dry spots that you can refinish and go over again with a little bit more oil. You want the first coat to be light just so that it soaks in, and then you can go heavier on the second and third coat. So on your final pass, just try to get rid of all the swirl marks and scratches, moving with the grain. We'll set this up to dry for about an hour, and then we'll come back, hit it with 320 grit sandpaper, just very lightly to knock down the bumps, and then we'll reapply the same way we just did. You want to reapply this at least 2 to 3 coats. The thicker you can get the coat on top, the less when you're cutting on this board that the knife will enter into through the finish and into the wood, and it makes your refinishing job the next time you come back much easier. And that's how easy it is to restore your old wooden cutting board. For more information on this and other tips on cutting boards, visit hartmanwoodworks.com. Thanks for watching.